This is just a quick overview of segmented turning, and I hope you enjoy. I made this chart up, and this means that you can create a bowl with as little as 6 segments or as many as 40. These are all the angles that you'll be cutting the segments at. And then this is the tangent. We use the tangent to multiply by the diameter of the section so we can get the length of each segment. So for this video, we're going to be doing 12 segments, and the diameter is only 4. When I say 4, I mean in inches. This is all in inches. Other than this is in degrees. So 4, and then I'm going to press enter. All it's doing is timesing the tangent by the diameter, and then I get the length of each segment, which is 1.0718. And so all I make sure is that between the wood, my stop block, and the blade, that there's 1.0718 of an inch in between the stop block and the blade. I measure this with a caliper to make sure that I'm precise. So at the same time, my miter gauge groove is on a 15-degree angle, and I need to cut out at least 12 pieces. I cut out more just in case some of them don't turn out. As you can see in this picture here, I have already cut one 15-degree angle on my piece. The longer edge of the 15-degree angle will go up against my miter gauge and rest up against the block. As you can see, the block does not go all the way to the blade. This is so that there is no binding when I begin to cut. It is merely just for a guide to make sure that I only cut the 1.0718 of an inch. Every time I make one cut, I flip my piece over. This way I'm getting the exact same cut every single time, and I'm not wasting wood. So my miter gauge groove does not go all the way past the blade. I normally would not leave those blocks sitting there because they can potentially hit the blade and fly back at me. My gauge does not go any further than I'm going because the slot in the wooden outfeed table is not big enough for my miter gauge. So I can only go that far. Otherwise, I recommend going all the way through. Another safety tip, each time I pass the blade with the jig, I make sure to pull away my piece of wood and then pull back the jig. The reason why I do this is so that my piece of wood cannot get caught on the blade, or just to make sure nothing bad can happen. The next step is to make sure that all of the edges are clean and they'll sit flush with each other. As you can see in this picture, there are many edges that do not, so we have to clean them up and make sure that they fit. So when you are done, all the edges should look like this one here, and then you can start gluing together. I use a pipe clamp like you see in this picture, and I just tighten it, and then at the end I just wipe off all the glue, and then I let that piece sit for at least 24 hours before I do anything with it. So the next part is to sand down the edges so that they're flat. This gets off any excess glue or anything like that. You can take this to the disc sander, but you have to make sure that it's not too small that it can fit through the crack in between the table and the disc sander, because then it will just shoot it and probably break on you. It can also be done just by sandpaper on a flat table. So the next thing you want to do is prep a scrap piece of wood that will join to your faceplate. You want to draw an X on it, preferably on both sides and from corner to corner. Because I am making a bracelet, I want it to be, that is 4x4. I want to make sure that my scrap piece is at least 4x4 inches, or as big as the faceplate. Now I'm going to glue on one of my segments. I put glue, then a piece of newspaper, then more glue, and then my segment. The reason why I do this is so that it's easier to split off my bowl or bracelet when I am done. Wipe off any excess glue. This is so it doesn't dull your chisels, and then let dry for at least 24 hours. I also have mine in a clamp. That also helps, or you can simply just set a weight on top. So now that it's all dry, I hot glued and screwed my faceplate onto my scrap piece. I cut out the extra material on the bandsaw and sanded it down so it's the same size as the faceplate. This is so that my knuckles don't get caught, or I can put my tool rest closer to the wood. And before I get started up, I always give it a few good spins to make sure that nothing is catching. I also make sure it's all sturdy before I start it up. I also set my tool rest to about just slightly below the center of the piece. This is so that when I use the chisel is cutting right on center. And sharp tools are happy tools, so I'm just going to cut down the edges until everything is round and clear, and then I'm going to move to the inside. I don't want to cut too much off the outside because it is a bracelet and I still have to make sure it'll fit on my wrist. Okay, so I still have some glue, so I'm going to turn it a little more until that is all gone, and then I'm going to move to the inside. I'm also going to move my tool rest closer. This way there's less of a gap between the tool rest and the wood. When turning the inside, I have the tool rest on a slight angle going into the bracelet. I do this so that I can get all the way to the back of it. This is more important for bowls. The bracelet isn't as deep, but for bowls especially, you need the tool rest to make sure that the tool doesn't want to snap inside. Yes, you want to make sure that your hair is tied back at all times. Mine is. I am actually pretty far away from it. I'm about a foot away from it, so it looks like my hair is close, but it's not really. As you can see, I have a lot to go. You can see the piece of paper in the back, that's so it can split easy, but there's also a lot of glue, which is why it's making it hard for me to get to the back, because the glue is a lot tougher than the wood. So I have already sanded my bowl starting at a lower grit, so 120 is what I started at, and then I moved to 220 and then up to 400. My next step is to use actual sawdust. This adds the wood's natural oils back into the wood, and it also gives almost a wax appearance. So before I part off the piece, I am using tung oil. The kind I have here is not the edible kind, so this cannot be put onto a cutting board, but I'm just going to apply it with a cloth. I apply it the same way that I sand. My fingers are not rolled up in the cloth, and always making sure that if it wants to pull, my fingers can let go. When you're done finishing and it's done drying, you can then use a parting tool to separate your bracelet from the scrap, remembering that there is that piece of paper there which will help make it pop off. So this is my version of the Longworth chuck. I just made it on the CNC. You spin the two wooden pieces and it basically opens and closes the black fingers like a chuck, and then you tighten it on the back with the wing nuts just to expand the rubber so it holds it nice, snug, and tight. I use this just to do light finishing. I don't want to go and take a gouge to this because it'll pop, my piece will probably pop right out of place, but it's just for finishing, so like sanding and light shaping. And here are some bowls I have made in the past.